So the next thing that I'll cover is what else can we do? What else can we do to do advanced things? So we can use advanced code quality tools. So what I'm going to do is look at something called Code Guru. So here is Code Guru. And in particular with Code Guru, what you can do is you can actually associate a repository, and it can go through and check the quality of your project. So I'm going to first step here, go to Associate Repository, and I'm going to say GitHub or GitHub Enterprise Cloud. There we go. And then I can connect to my GitHub account. Once I've done that, I can go to Advanced Testing Techniques, and then I can associate it. Now that I've associated this, what it will do will be it'll allow me to go through and do advanced analysis on this. And so let me show one that I've done before. So in this particular one, this one I've actually associated it before. And so one of the things that I can do with this is actually go to profiling, and I believe, or let's see, code reviews here, repository analysis. And I actually had it analyze a repository that I had some code in, and you can see what it does is it says Code Guru Reviewer successfully finished reviewing your source code. It looked at 658 lines of code, and it has 2 recommendations inside. And one of them that it found out was in this project that I told it to talk to, it appears that you're using a string to construct a shell command that invokes the shell explicitly via shell equal true. This might be shell injection. We recommend that you use shlex quote function to properly escape whitespace and shell metacharacter. So I have a security hole in my code that I was able to find. And if I go here, we can look at that exact line of code. And in fact, it is a security hole in that it's not a huge security hole because essentially it's internal to my tool. But if this was embedded in somebody else's project and they weren't aware of exactly what's happening, there could be some issues in that there could be a injection attack here where you could put other commands in as well. So this is something that potentially I would want to change. It's optional depending on where this would be used, but it was able to flag this as something to look at. If I look at the second one, we can see analysis of the code showed that this resource may not have closed properly. The context lib module can be helpful. So if I go here and I look at a setup file here, we can see that actually they raise a good point that in fact it isn't closed. That this basically file handle inside of here, I could add in a close handle or use the with context as well. So it actually did find two bugs here potentially that could work with my code. So if we go back to this repository that I had associated before, I can click on it now. And if I wanted to, I could actually go through here and do something similar. So if I go to code reviews, I could say create repository analysis, and I can say analyze the code for code quality recommendations, or do code and security recommendations. And this will create a build artifact in an S3 bucket as a result. Let's just go ahead and do code recommendations, keep it simple. And I'm going to go here and say advanced testing techniques. I'm going to say create repository analysis. It'll ask for the branch. I can say the master branch, and then it'll go through and it'll look at this. And this says a review typically will be completed in 5 to 10 minutes. So in a nutshell, something like this, these code analysis tools, I think are absolutely part of the process for improving the quality of your code, and that they flag things in advance for you so that you can then go through and either write tests for it or change the code. And so this just gets into this concept of improving the quality through testing. So let me just briefly talk about this while this is doing the analysis. So if we look at what is the point of this? Why would we want to set this up? Well, it's really, in my opinion, part of the same thing. And with testing, it goes into the word Kaizen. And so if I go to here, I say Kaizen plus continuous delivery, or CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous delivery. And the idea, the word Kaizen is a Japanese word that means continuous improvement. And they use this actually initially with the Japanese automobile industry after World War II. And a lot of people now refer to this with testing as well. And this idea is that you have a feedback loop where you're constantly improving things. So you have a continuous improvement mindset. So we'll go through here and we'll say continuous improvement. And the idea here is that there's many ways to improve your code. And so one way to improve your code would just be to set up continuous integration, which is what we set up with, for example, GitHub Actions, right? So we've got GitHub Actions, and that's one way to improve our code. We could also, and we could say testing, right? That's what we're doing there. We could include linting, right? So that could be another step. Is the lint will improve the code. We could also add in these emerging AI tools, right? So we know that AWS Code Guru is an emerging AI tool, which it found 2 bugs that are legit bugs that I didn't know existed in my code, and you could say that this discovers bugs. You could also look at other things like source code metrics as well. And let me just show that as well. We'll say source metrics. There's another tool that I've developed called DevML that I'll briefly show you, that looks at different things like churn and other metrics. But the whole idea here is that each of these things, they're not static. They're constantly being performed on your code and making your code better, right? You're constantly improving your code. In addition to the continuous delivery, by putting it into production, is another step in improving your quality of code. So it's not just one of these things. They all work together, and there is no one perfect solution. It's this process of, I want to make my code better. How do I do it? I want to do continuous integration. I want to do linting. I want to do logging. I want to do code tools that improve things. And so when I was a CTO, these are all the kind of tools that I would use when I was actually setting up a process for a company that I managed of, let's say 100 developers. So let's move over to this DevML tool really quick, just to show you example of why I built this tool here. So what this tool does is that it allows you to get metrics on your code. And so one of the things that you can do, for example, is that you could look at the active days the developer was working on your project. So this happened to be run a while back here, but this shows that the developers around Flask and Click, that their active ratio is that on any given day of the week, including weekends, there's a 26% chance that they're working on the code. So that could be something that you could look into, like, maybe people are getting burnt out, they're working too much, or maybe they're getting pulled into meetings too much. But this is another thing that could improve your quality of code, is look at the behavior of the people in your company. Another one as well is the churn. And so this is a key metric that is important to look at. If you look at Flask, for example, here's the top 25 absolute and relative churn. And what the churn means is that how often is a file being changed relative to its size. And in this case, we can see that this init file is changed all the time. It's possible there could be some bugs in there because it keeps getting changed. Although it's a configuration file, maybe that's not that important. But we can see like templating, like this file, maybe that's another one that could have some bugs associated with it. Flask views looks like it's got some potential issues. So it doesn't, again, mean that there is a bug. It just allows you to get more insights in so that you can go through here and you get this constant, continuous improvement process. So that's really the idea behind these behavioral metrics and or these AWS Code Guru bugs here. So let's go back to this analysis here and see if it's been able to find anything. So I believe that it failed. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. And says the request repository or commit does not exist. So maybe there's just not enough code for it to actually analyze. There's just nothing for it to do. But the concept here you can see from the other example here, which is that the general idea is you build these tools on top and they analyze your code and show the quality of it. Now there's another tool that I'll just show you really briefly called Code Climate. It is another similar tool. There's a bunch of different these kind of tools, and so this does a similar thing where it'll look at the quality of your code. And so let's see if I can just set this up. I believe there's probably like a free trial for this. Maybe let's go ahead and try this out. Sure, let's authorize Code Climate, and there we go. And if I point this at open source, let's go to add a repository, and we'll say authorize it, and this will do a similar thing. It'll go through and look at the code quality of my code, and I think that I should be able to find the advanced testing in here. It should give me that in a second. Okay, let's go to advanced testing techniques. There we go. Whoops, advanced testing techniques. Here we go. So this is going to go through here. It's going to clone it out and actually look at the quality of this particular code as well. So there's not a lot in there, so we should be able to see this, and we can see that it'll go through here and give me all these different analysis of the code. So maintainability, test coverage, all this stuff. And I believe there's even a report, GitHub integrations, that if I wanted to, I think it has a badge as well. Let's see, GitHub. There's a way to do, here we go, badges. So I could also add a markdown badge and throw that in as well. So here we go. Maintainability. Let's go ahead and copy this, put this inside. So we're basically doing, we're tricking out this repository and adding every kind of bell and whistle that you can add. So we'll say Code Climate, maintainability, like this. And then what was the other one that they had, which was, let's see, where is that? Test coverage. It'll also allow me to copy this test coverage, and we'll say Code Climate test coverage. There we go. Perfect. So there's a lot of things that in my opinion add value beyond just doing the continuous integration. Also these behavioral things where look at the behavior of the team, and you also look at the security holes for your code, and all those things can be part of an advanced testing technique. So let me do the next step here, which is, since we are already inside of AWS, let's go back there and let's also use their build system, and let's see how that looks. So AWS has a build system called code build. So if we go to code build here, and one of the things that we can do with code build is that we can do almost identical things that you could do with, for example, GitHub Actions. And so if I go here and I say create build project, what it will do is allow me to set things up so that it tests the code in the AWS environment. And this could be really handy if you're doing things on AWS in particular, especially doing deploys on AWS. So first up here, I'm going to see advanced. I'm going to call this advanced testing. Say this is an AWS version of advanced testing, and I'm going to go ahead and build a build badge here. And then where do we want the code to come from? You could use their AWS environment, or you could actually use GitHub. I'm going to use GitHub, and it's going to look through my repository here and find one that it can actually test out with. So I'm going to do a repository in my GitHub account, and we'll call this Noah Gift Advanced Testing. There we go. And then I could go through here and do other things like submodules or, all that stuff, but I'm not going to do that. And then how do you want it to run? In this case, I want it to run every time I make a change. So I'm going to go ahead and say rebuild every time the change is made. And then for event type, we'll just say push events. And then for environments, we can go through here and say, well, what kind of environment do I want to test this in? I can either do a custom Docker environment, or I could actually do one that they manage themselves. I think this is probably the best option for AWS. And so I'm going to go through here. I'm going to select Amazon Linux 2, which is their version of Amazon Linux. It's a lot like Red Hat Linux. And I'm going to say runtime here. I'm going to say standard. And then for image, let's go ahead and say Amazon Linux x86 64 standard 3, right? So just pick the latest version. Always use the latest image. Environment, we want to run in Linux. Notice though, I could test GPU code, which can be handy. There are some great things you can do with Python and GPU, but I'm going to say just Linux. And from here, if I wanted to build Docker images, I could do this. I don't need to do this. For this particular one, I don't need to do anything tricky with AWS, like do a deployment. So I can just let it use a default service role. But it is important to know, if you wanted to do like a continuous deployment process, you would need to actually create an IAM role that would have the privileges to do that action. So in this case, we won't do that though. We'll go through here and set this up. There we go. And then from here, we have the option here to either use something called a build spec YAML file, or insert build commands step by step. For example, enter the commands you want to run during the build phase, separate each command with a and. And so if I click on build editor here, I could actually just kind of build this thing out right inside of this repo if I wanted to. I think this is probably the better way to do it though, is to use this thing called a buildspec.yaml. So in order for this to run, I'm going to need to check that into my project, this configuration file. So how do we do this? Well, I'm going to go back to code spaces here, and I'm going to go ahead and set that up. Actually, you know what? Now that I think about it, probably because we're on AWS, let me do this in their development environments. So I'm going to go to console here, and I'm going to spin up AWS Cloud9, and we'll go through here. And from here, what I can do is create an environment to test out my code and build it out. So this is really similar to GitHub Actions is AWS Cloud9. So we'll go through here and we'll say advanced testing and environments for advanced testing. Here we go. Let me go through the next step here. And so in this particular environment, notice here that it'll create a new EC2 instance that has a micro. I don't need a lot of work or a lot of horsepower. And I'm going to say Amazon Linux 2 because that's what I'm going to build on. And then notice it'll time out after 30 minutes. So this is a great environment for AWS to do testing on. I use it all the time. And in particular, if you're going to be building with AWS Code Build, this is a great environment to use. So what I'll do is, this will take just a second to set up, but basically I will create SSH keys so that I can talk to GitHub. I'll create my build.yaml file here, and then I will then make this environment my new environment for testing the AWS portion. So this is a pretty normal setup as well, where I can see where you could use GitHub Actions for some components of what you want to test, but then also use an AWS native environment when you want to get into the AWS pieces. So while that's actually spinning up, let me quickly look at a example Hugo project that I have set up that will give me a code build example. So let's go through here. Let's just look at something that will, let's see, this is probably a good one that I did recently, where this is something where I do continuous delivery for a content management website, but it gives you the feel for what a code build type file would look like. Is that you can see that there's commands that run, you can set in environmental variables if you needed to, and then in this particular environment, instead of just testing, I actually deploy a new website, and I deploy that via AWS. In this case, though, I'm going to just use this as the basic structure for how I actually do my testing. Okay, so we got this thing set up here. So again, the first thing that I'll need to do is I will need to create SSH keys. So we'll go ahead and do that. Say SSH key gen-t RSA. And then I will just print this out to the standard out so that I can look at it. Go here. And inside of this particular repo, I can go to GitHub and go to my settings and just add this key so that I can work with this repo. So go for this advanced testing, paste that in, and there we go. So now that I've got that set up, I can do a clone of the repo. So I can go back to this thing. Let's see, where is this environment? Let's click on here, go home. Let's go to code, copy this, and do a git clone. Okay, got this thing cloned up. And what's nice is because GitHub Actions and all that is already running, it saves me a lot of time because I know that things should work over here. And so I just need to create a virtual environment. So I'll do that first. We'll say Python 3 -mvenv tilde, and we'll call this advanced testing as well. I'll source it, advanced testing, bin activate. Okay, now that I've got that, I can cd into that directory, and notice that this environment here from Cloud9 is pretty nice. It's got a great editor, does syntax highlighting and everything. So if I want to just get this thing working, what do? I can benefit from all that hard work I did before by doing a make install, right? Do make install. Now do make test. There we go. So things work here. Make lint. Everything's going well. And if I do a make all, right, I can just test everything at the same time. That's probably the first thing I should have done. So everything's working. The only thing I need to do though is add that code build file, right? Which is, we see it's right here. It's called build spec, build spec.yaml. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to use this as a template, and I'm going to go back here, put these together, and I'm going to say touch build spec.yml. Build spec.yml. There we go. So to run this thing, I'm going to paste it in here. I'm just going to pull out the stuff that I don't need. So I don't need environmental variables. And for installation, build, install commands, we can just go through here and we can say phases. We've got install, build, post build commands. I think we can just say that we can just say like install here, which would be make install, and then we can say the rest would be testing, right? We can just keep it simple, and then we can say, you know, testing completed. So what I'll do here is I will say make lint, or I mean, I guess I could break it up into pieces if I wanted to, but I'll be lazy. Testing and linting, make lint, and then we'll do this. We'll say make test. So in theory, this should work if we do this. And so if I say get add build spec, get commit, adding build spec for testing on AWS, this should get me cooking here. Let's go ahead and do that. And so if I go back to code build here, I'm okay with saying build spec.yaml because I have all the build commands in this file. I personally think it's the way to go because it's less magic and it's not hidden inside of this editor. Okay, so what else do we need to do? I could create artifacts, for example, and those could go to S3. I could cache things, do encryption as well, like if I need to encrypt the artifacts. But I think we're ready to go. And so we can say, I don't think we can do a space in there. That was the problem. So let's go ahead and fix this. Build commands. No, we don't want to do that. We want to do build spec. Okay, let's code build advanced. Oh, there we go. It was not too smart the way it creates the service role. Okay, so in theory here, let's grab this badge first, and we will go to this project. And boy, we got a lot of badges in here now. We have GitHub Actions, code climate. Let's go to AWS code build here, and let's throw that in there. That looks like a weird badge though. Let's just double check here. Is that really what they want me to do? Badge URL. It's kind of looks sloppy, but okay. We'll just throw that in there like this, and let's see what it looks like actually. Commit changes. Yeah, it doesn't look like a badge to me. It looks like something else. Yeah, I think I would have to do something a little bit trickier to make it into a badge. Like I think I have to go here and do something like they did before, which is say like this, and then put in this and say badge, AWS badge, like this, and then put in the right markdown syntax. And let's go ahead and save that. Hopefully that makes our badge appear. Not going to spend a lot of time on that, but anyway, we can get that working later. But next up here, you've successfully created the project. Let's go ahead and start the build, and let's see what happens. So it's building, and we can look at this thing in action here, and we can actually tail it. And if we get lucky, it'll all work on the first try. Okay, so it looks like invalid build spec name testing and linting expects build, install, post build, pre-build. Okay, so it looks like you have to call the build spec a very particular name, which is not a problem. So let's go ahead and fix that. So it wants a very particular name for this. So we'll just call this build. And I'm going to go ahead and make that change. Git add, git commit. Now this should automatically trigger here, and git push. So I believe this should automatically trigger because we told it to automatically trigger. So let's go back here, and look, there we go. So we see it automatically tests again because of the push changes, which is nice. So I can also take a look at this project, and we should be able to look at the tail and also see it in action. Okay, so we went to install. It's going through and it's installing the code. So far so good. And then for the build phase, right, we can see that it was able to successfully test it, and we're good to go. So we've got this process completely working. We can see this successful, and we can look at all the different build details. So this is a nice option as well for AWS, especially if you're going to do deployment to somewhere like Elastic Beanstalk, to a virtual machine, to AWS Lambda, is to set up the process with the code build here. So really the last thing I need to do here is potentially just shut this thing down because I don't need it. It accomplished the job that I needed it to do. So we've been able to successfully get it to work on the AWS environment. And so really what are the last things that we can do is to potentially get it into a slightly more complex testing structure. So what I can do is if I go to advanced testing techniques here, I've already got AWS set up. I've got the formatting. I've got all this stuff set up, but we're only testing a hello world script. What if I want to do something like test a command line tool? Let's get into that next here and build out. That'll probably be the last thing that I can cover is how do I test a functional test for a command line tool using the Python ecosystem. Fortunately, that's pretty straightforward. once this code space wakes up. Yeah, and if this code space is taking too long, give it maybe a few more seconds. I can also use Cloud9, either one. It doesn't matter to me which one I use. I'm almost giving up on it. What I might just do is just use Cloud9 again, because Cloud9 is actually just as good. So let's go back to Cloud9 here, and we'll just wake that one back up again that I was just in. Here we go. Because I don't think it's shut down yet. There we go. So it's still, we'll just use Cloud9. Okay, so the next thing that I can do is use build a command line tool. So to do that, I'll say test hello CLI. So we've only tested initially here some really basic things like this thing, like, doesn't really do a lot. But a command line tool, I think, is one of the funnest things to play around with. And so I'm going to look at a previous example project here that I had that that we can just take a little bit of code from. So this function bike rider repo, if I look at this hello command line tool here, you can see here a very basic command line tool. I import click, I import a function, and I call it like this. So I can actually do something similar here, and I'll just tweak it though to change it the way I've got the code set up here. So I'm going to just paste this in and just change everything. So I'm going to say from hello import add like this, and then I'm also going to just clean things up here a little bit, and notice that it says no add because it's add this, right? So it's the syntax highlighting is helping me here. And this one, I'll just say call add this, and I'll say the options to pass in would be click dot option, and we'll do a Y and an X, and we can add even a help message here that says first number to add, number to add, and then we can do help is second number to add like this, and then we know that it's going to take an X and a Y in here, so we pass those in, and then we just get the results will be add this, and it will be X and Y like that. And what we can do as well is that I can actually add some fancy like syntax highlight or some output with click. That's one of the cool things that it does, is that it will let me do some stuff that makes it look a little bit prettier. So I'll say call add this, right? So this is I'm able to reuse that existing code that's well tested and has everything set up, and I've got now a command line tool that I can actually use. So this looks like it would probably work. So how do I run this? I'm going to say, well, first I'll make it executable. So I'll say chmod plus x hello CLI, and then I will also put a shebang line at the top. So do this. So I'll say here user bin env Python, and then we'll go ahead and run this thing with help just to see the help menu. Notice that I don't have any help, so let's go ahead and change that. say this is a CLI that adds X and Y, right? So it doesn't have a lot of stuff going on, but notice that I can check this out. So now if I go through here and I say -x is 1 and -y is 2, we can see that we've got everything in theory working, although that is not what I think should be happening. So it says here's 1, here's 2, so this is X and it's a string. Well, the reason why is that, well, this helps us debug things, right? Is that, and this is actually a pretty tricky bug here, is you can add two strings together. And so in this particular example, we have to figure out a fix here. So, you could do a bunch of different things. You could say if it's a string, do this or whatever. But in our particular case, just to keep things simple, maybe what I could do is, I think that click, you can convert it to a integer. So it's a click integer arguments. So if we go to click here, let's see, type integer, there we go. So we could do this, right? So we could go back here. There's a bunch of different ways we could fix this, but let's just do this. Let's just say type, it's required, and it's type integer. So now what happens? There we go. We're able to fix it just by using the click tool themselves. So we got that cooking. Let's really quickly build a test. So if we go to test here, we can say, and again, I'm going to leverage some code I've got earlier just to make things simpler. And I'll say we want to do something like this. So I want to do import the click runner. So let's do that first. Do that. And then we just need to add a functional test for this. And so to do that, I'll do something like this. And what this will do is it'll say test. We'll just say test CLI. We invoke the command line tool runner. And then I'll need to call the function itself. So I need to look at what did I call that function? I called it call add this. So we'll put that in there. Call add this. And we know that it's going to take two things. So it's going to take an X of 1. And then we also know it's going to take a Y with a dash on it. And then it's also, and we'll give that a 1. And so the status code should be 0. And we should see assert that 2 is in the output. And let's just double check this. Why is it complaining? No. Oh, because we need to import it from the command line tool. So we can say from hello CLI, import call add this, like that. There we go. So that's why this editor is pretty handy to have syntax highlighting. Okay, everything looks good here. Let's go ahead and say make test. Boom, we got it. Things are working. Now, what we don't have though is the test coverage report for the command line tool. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's go to the make file here and just tweak it. Go through here and say --cov equals test hello, like that. Okay. And make test. There we go. That should have shown the test coverage report. Not sure why the test coverage, module test hello was never imported because hello CLI is the name of it. Hello CLI. There we go. There we go. So we see that CLI's got good test coverage. Hello's got good test coverage. Let's go ahead and commit all this stuff, get status. We'll add in all these changes, adding in testing for CLI. And the great thing about the way we set all this stuff up is that because of the makefile style, we're not doing weird things in different projects and putting hidden commands in AWS and hidden commands in GitHub Actions and everything's brittle. Is that whenever I make a change to this, if we go back to code build, for example, and we look at it, everything should be the same, right? So if we go to code build, even though I did a bunch of changes here, I didn't have to change one thing in this project because it's doing the same thing, right? It's just doing the test of the make install, make lint, make test, and likewise, if we go to boy, that thing really hung. I'm glad I abandoned ship. If we go to GitHub Actions here, and I go to advanced testing here, and we look at the GitHub Actions, let's go to Actions, we can see that that worked, right? All this stuff worked here, and also this code build, it looks like it's working as well, right? So we didn't have to change anything. It can work with multiple build systems at the same time. So there's a lot of advantages to using this makefile setup here, and hopefully this shows why it's so helpful.